we were sitting down with a couple of pastors on one day. I was a new associate pastor at a small church. So it was a church of about 30 people, 30 people when I went there. So it's a little church, not a lot of people there. So me and the senior pastor, whose name was also Kevin, so it made it really fun for church meeting stuff. Hey, Pastor Kevin. Which one? So it was fun. We had a really good time with it, actually. But we're sitting down with this pastor, and we're talking about, okay, we're a new pastor, and this pastor's been in ministry for 40 years. He's been in churches around the world and in different countries and served as a missionary and is kind of known for going into churches and kind of being a revitalizer, bringing some life back in the churches. But he is a guy well developed in his years. And I remember we're sitting down and he tells us, your first year of ministry, change nothing. Make no major changes. Don't change the music style, don't change the chairs, the pulpit, the flooring, whatever it is. Don't change how they do children's ministry or youth ministry or their schedule. Change nothing. So me and that pastor, we leave that church and we go to this other church, same day, and he's giving us almost the same advice, but he tells us this. Change everything. Anything you can change it. Show your difference, show your own flair, your own style, put your own spin on everything you can. This pastor had been in ministry for 10, 15 years. He had pastored a large church, and he was successful in our eyes, but change everything. So me and this other pastor is only a few years older than me, I guess probably 6 or 7 years older than me. We're talking as we leave, and it's like, so dude, one guy says change everything, one guy says change nothing. What do we change? So we go back and we're talking. It's like, well, I think it really depends on what it is. I mean, who here is one of those people, like if you go into a new job place, you want to change everything when you get there. Like if this isn't the way that you think it should be, you're like, I'm going to change it and I'm going to fix it and make it my way. Is anyone that person? Who's like, I'm just going to go with the flow, I'm going to see how they do things and kind of see how it goes. Anyone do that? Who's go with the flow? We got a few go with the flows, we got a few changes. Okay. You'll never guess which one I am. I'm a changer normally. If I can, I want to play with it, I want to mess with it, mess it up, try to make it different. That's what I'm going to do. So that's what I focused on. But I've learned that it really depends on what it is, when it is, how it applies, the position of the church. So they both tended to be right, while they both also tended to be wrong. Because you can't go somewhere and change everything. And you don't want to go somewhere and change nothing. When we moved into this building, a little more than a year ago, there was no wall there. There's no stage here. There's no back wall, there was no cross, there were no TVs on the walls, there were no chairs. They used little folding chairs the last church did. We could go on of all the things that are different in this room alone. Are they different because it's better than the way it was before? Everyone here thinks so, because that's why we did it that way. That was what we were going for. So the story we're looking at today is Nehemiah, and he's traveling back to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah is more of a changer. He's going to make a difference. He's going to change things as he gets there. But he also shows patience too. So we're going to look at that. Nehemiah chapter 2 verses 9 through 20 is when we'll pick up. And up to this point we've seen Nehemiah in chapter 1 get the bad news. He took it and he prayed and he mourned and he fasted and he looked for what God was wanting to do. And he waited. And he waited some more. And he waited 4 months. The king finally asked him, hey, what's wrong? And he says, I'm upset because the city of my ancestors is messed up. The city of my ancestors is torn down. So that's where he leaves it. The king's like, okay, well, how can I help? What can I do? He said, well, send me back to rebuild the walls. So he sends him back. And as he goes back to rebuild the walls there, he could have stopped at that question right there. I got approval, I'm going to go. But he says also, can you give me letters for the governors around us? And I also need to borrow some wood from your forest, because we need some trees. And the king gives him everything he asked for. Sure, go ahead and go. So that's where we pick up chapter 9, or verse 9 in chapter 2. We get some jealous guys who are governors in local areas, and that's who talks to them. So reading verse 9 and 10. When I came to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, I delivered the king's letters to them. The king, I should add, had sent along army officers and horsemen to protect me. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of my arrival, they were very displeased that someone had come to help the people of Israel. So right here, we look at Sanballat. He's referred to as the Horonite, but he's also referred to as the governor of Samaria. That's historically what he's referred to as. And then Tobiah the Ammonite, his name, the Ammonite, is actually not a sign of his ancestry, but it's a sign of the people he chooses to be around. And the Ammonite official is also for someone who is a governor, someone in charge. So when I was younger, when I would first read this, like when I was a little kid or in high school even, I thought of these guys, like he comes and they're displeased to hear about him. I thought of them as the old guys at the coffee shop. I grew up in a little town, so the old men would gather at a coffee shop every morning and smoke their cigarettes and drink coffee and complain about everything going on around them. So that's how I saw this, and that's how I thought of this. But it's not just grumpy old men who had no other place to be. It's actually the people in charge, right? Like these are the people that are coming in that he has to pass through their land to get there. So that's who he's talking to. And the other part is, and when we look up, he says that when he came to deliver the king's letters to them, the king, should I add, had sent on army officers, and horsemen to protect me. So you can imagine, they know nothing about his coming. There was no letter that went before to say, hey, this is coming. He's bringing the letters with the timber, with the horsemen, with everyone that came to help him. This is an entourage showing up. The best way I can think of to describe this is when he came and he showed up to those governors, he kind of had a little bit of swagger when he shows up. You know, like, these are horsemen, like he's somebody important. Look at me. And that's not what he's doing, but it does give that image of who's showing up. So you can imagine, they're displeased. It's not like if he would have came by himself, they would have been like, he can't do anything on his own. So continuing forward in verse 11, so I arrive in Jerusalem. So he sees them first because he's got to pass through their province before he gets to Jerusalem. So I arrive in Jerusalem. 3 days later, I slipped out during the night, taking only a few others with me. I had not told anyone about the plans God had put in my heart for Jerusalem. We took no pack animals with us except the donkey I was riding. The important part here is that he had been there for 3 days and told no one why he came. He's got army officers, his whole entourage. Hey, we're going to stay here for a few days. That's all he told the people there. And there were people who were in charge there already. Then moving on to verse 13, it says, after dark I went out through the valley gate, past the jackal's well, and over to the dung gate to inspect the broken walls and burned gates. Then I went to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but my donkey couldn't get through the rubble. So though it was still dark, I went up the Kidron Valley instead, inspecting the wall before I turned back and entered again at the valley gate. So reading this, if you're like me, I have absolutely no clue what they were doing. It's like, this is cool. He went out a gate that's called a valley gate. Then he went past a dung gate. That sounds like not a good time. And then broken walls, burned gates. So this doesn't help. So I actually have an image for us to help out here. So he goes out at the valley gate, which is this spot over here. And he goes down past the dung gate, the fountain gate, and then he's heading up towards the water gate. And he can't get past that. So then the Kidron Valley would be over here on the right side, on the other side of the water gate. And it's a valley. So you go down into it, and then you come back up. And then just for geography's sake, the famous part in the Bible called the Mount of Olives that you see referenced to several times is up here in the top right-hand corner. So the Kidron Valley would be in between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. So that's one of the highest points around Jerusalem, is where the Mount of Olives is. So you can see he goes out here on the left and he travels around the bottom half. And then because the rubble is so bad, he has to go into the valley just to see. So, hey, have you guys ever been over here by like the Walmart, Best Buy area? Just over here? If you're there on the highway, or if you're on the outer road there by Yakov, it's this huge brick wall. Like, if you've never been over there by it, go drive past it, and there's a road you can take behind it, and you can be right next to the brick wall. And it's probably 20 foot, 25 foot tall. It's really tall, maybe even taller. And I think of him going down into that valley and looking at it. I think of it kind of like that. He's even further away from it, but he's looking up. And he's looking to see what's missing, what's messed up, what's burned down, what needs repair, just how bad the shape is. So he didn't even go all the way around it to see how bad it was. I think he had a good idea just by seeing the southern half. Maybe the southern half was worse than the rest of it. But in the next chapter, which is where these numbers are from, you can see they actually rebuild the entire thing all the way around. So it is all destroyed and is all in bad shape. So that's what he follows. Then moving on in verse 16, the city officials did not know I had been out there or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or anyone else in administration. Summarized short version, he talked to nobody important about his plans. None of the people in the town, no one in charge. He didn't tell any of them what he was doing, which is an important lesson we'll talk on later. Verse 17 and 18, but now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me, and about my conversation with the king. They replied at once, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. Just a quick stop there. He tells them, he checked everything out. It's in really bad shape. It needs rebuilt. And then he says, let's end this disgrace. At this moment, they don't say, yes, let's rebuild the wall. They're not convinced. They already know this. They live there. They've been living in this for years. This is the way it is. They've accepted it at this point. So then he tells them how God had his hand on him the whole way through. That's that first part of chapter 1, chapter 2, as it comes before we get here. That's his time of prayer, fasting, and mourning, and the king giving him favor. And then he even tells them, this is my conversation with the king. Properly, he mentions God before he mentions the king. He couldn't have been there without the king, but he also couldn't have been there without God. Because if it wouldn't have been with God, he probably wouldn't have had a head and wouldn't have been able to go there. So he tells them this is why. And then once they hear of how God helped him, how the king was behind him, and how everyone else was ready, at that time, they say, yes, let's rebuild the wall. And then, you know what they do? They go home and they plan and prepare and think of how they can do it. No, it actually says, so they began the good work. Let's do it, and they did. It's a good lesson. When we say we're going to do something, do it. It's not even the sermon today. It's a free bonus point there. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of our plan, they scoffed contemptuously. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They asked. I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding the wall, but you have no share, legal right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. So here's Sanballat and Tobiah again. And now they introduce a third character, Geshem the Arab. One that's not an appropriate name for people to call people these days properly. I'm just going to say that. We just don't usually use those labels anymore. But with Geshem, he's called the Arab because he's an Arabian prince, basically. He is a leader of Arabian tribes around Jerusalem. So these are three powerful people. And something that's important to note, when we look at this map, let's go back here, this map. So the tribes that Geshem is in charge of is here to the south, and over here to the west. Then where Sanballat and Tobiah in charge of are to the north and to the east. So these three guys who are saying and scoffing contemptuously against him, they surround him. And I love that word. No other place in the Bible have I found where the word contemptuously is used. Like, that's one of those words, like, it is so descriptive and so negative at the same time. Like, I can't think of another word you would use as a synonym for it appropriately. The best thing I can think of is when you watch a movie, like a 007 movie and the bad guy, or some other movie that's similar to that, and he's petting his animal, or his hands, like, they scoff contemptuously. That is the only thing I can think of when I think of that. It is like the epiphany of a bad person, the bad guy in the movie. Yes, that's what he's saying. And then they ask him, are you rebelling against the king? So this part is more important than it may seem. When Nehemiah got permission to go back and rebuild the wall, there was actually a king 13 years before that told him not to build the wall. It's in Ezra chapter 4. The people, the relatives of these, believed relatives, at the very least they were people with the same goal in mind, as Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. They wrote a letter to the king and said, you shouldn't let Jerusalem rebuild the walls because they are troublemakers and bad people. They're wanting to do nothing but tear everything up. So don't let them rebuild the wall. The king writes a letter back, say, hey, I checked the history books and you're right. So I'm not going to allow Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. And he makes a decree they cannot rebuild walls. Does anyone know the name of that king? You know the name, Asher? He's talking for me. The king's name? King Artaxerxes. It's the same king sending Nehemiah. So when they say, what are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They're saying, hey, we're going to stop you here because we're going to write another letter. Or we already have the king's favor. Or we're going to do this because of that. They're throwing history back at him. So when Nehemiah went, there was a reason why the king allowed Nehemiah to go. God's favor was on him, yes. But I also believe that we saw with the character of Nehemiah earlier in chapter 2, when he says, well, how long will you be gone? Him showing that he wants Nehemiah to come back. The king trusts Nehemiah and knows that when he's going, he's not going to start a rebellion or to revolt or any of these things. So there's already a relationship there. But Nehemiah, instead of saying any of this that I just said, he says, the God of heaven will help us succeed. That's it. We as servants will restart rebuilding the wall. You're not going to stop us. But you have no share, legal right, or historic claim in Jerusalem. That last sentence, what he is telling them, you have no historic claim. You have no past. You have no share, that's present. And you have no legal right, that's future. So he's saying you have no past, present, or future claim in Jerusalem. So in these times, especially for historic Jews, if you read like some of the really hard to read parts of the Bible in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, land never left a family. That was their thing. It got split, it went this way. The first son got a double portion, then all the other people got one portion, but it always stayed in the family. If one son died, that family went back to another son, and so on. So property didn't leave. So when he's telling them, you have no claim to the city of Jerusalem. You have no ancestry here. You have no part in it. You have nothing to take from it. So it's very important what he's telling them. It's very clear. You have no business here. Seen that in a movie before? You have no business here. That's what he's telling them. Get out. You have no business here. And I like that. And you like that too, Asher. I'm glad. So I think it's important here before we move into the next part of this, and that's really talking about and breaking this down, is following God's plan. As we build the kingdom of God on earth, every person has a vital role to contribute. Because when they went to rebuild, everyone assisted. This wasn't just Nehemiah and a few hired servants went out, but it was everyone went out and they prepared and they worked. So our greatest potential comes from working together. So therefore, we need to be zealous in our work. Not just in talking about it, but in doing it and believing in God's hand upon us. I think that's an important step as we look at following God's plan. So the first thing that we need to see, and if you're following along with your checkbox here, your paper, examine within, check the walls, and see what's missing. So if we're following God's plan, the last couple weeks we've seen pray, we've seen fast mourn, we've seen be patient, remember the promises of God, all of that stuff. But if we're following God's plan, we need to check within our hearts. Why am I doing this? For me, when me and Kristen came to start this church, 3 years ago, that was a pivotal question for us. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I think it's cool to tell people I'm starting a church? Or I want people to be like, hey, that guy started a church. Yeah, Caleb knows. That's why Caleb's the church photographer. It's not so he can do it and be a servant, it's so he can say, hey, I take pictures at the church, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. We got to examine our motives. Checking the walls. That's checking the walls around our hearts and our lives. Sometimes people have something so familiar about them but so distant that it bothers us. If you think about someone that really annoys you, think of the most annoying trait they have, and I want you to check within, check your walls, if that annoys you so much because that's a trait you have in yourself. If you've never experienced that, you will. You'll be like, this person drives me crazy. You tell someone, they're like, well, it bothers you. You do the exact same thing. What do you mean? Check the walls. See what's there. See what's missing. See what's damaged. See what needs repaired. Because if we're following God's plan, we're going to be attacked. If it's not self-imposed damage, it'll be damage from the outside. It'll be damage from Satan trying to keep us down, Satan trying to keep us from moving forward, the powers that will stand against God to keep us from taking the next step. So we need to check the walls, examine within, see what's missing. That's step one. We've prayed, we've fasted, we've mourned, we're being patient. We've finally got time where we've taken action, we're bold about making our requests. Now we need to check again. Because right here, this step, in between praying, fasting, mourning, all of that, and taking action and having a chance to be bold and make your request and actually going through the plan, this is the pivotal point where something either is successful or it's a failure. Because if you go into something, and even if you've gotten permission, you've seen God's blessing on it, everything goes well, and you think it's all coming up, and then you get to the moment and you drop the ball. And what do we call that? We call that failure normally, right? And some of us, failure is the end. Something that I love, and it's a quote that I write on. And if you want to write this quote down, if you've never heard it, if you can't remember it, I want you to. Failure is only final when you quit. That's it. Like, you can try again. You can do over. If you're a pastor, you get another week, hopefully, to try again, to do better next time. If you're a worship leader, just keep singing and hope nobody notices when you miss a chord or a key or you drop your pick and your guitar. That's what you hope for. The second thing is keep your plans quiet until the right time. This is a lesson for me more than it is for anyone. I know that God's given you a plan. God's called you to do something. There's a few reasons why the plan stays quiet. First of all, I want to start with God. Has anyone ever wondered why they don't know their plan? Or would anyone want to know their plan for the next year that God had for them? This is every experience you'll have in the next year, or 5, or 10. Would anyone want to know that? Any hands? Nobody wants to know? No? I think God keeps us in the quiet for a reason. Because if we knew what we would go through in the next year, we'd probably be like, can I get less on my plate? Like, I just need a little bit less trial, a little less tribulation. Can I get more good stuff? I find that it's the small glimmers of hope that we get that help us keep driving, keep moving forward more than anything else. Because trials come, tribulations come, problems come. Sometimes you cut your finger. Sometimes the systems don't work. Sometimes you hurt yourself, you get damaged. It happens. Sometimes your car gets damaged. Those are bad days. But you have to keep going forward. The other reason why it's important to keep our plans quiet, and it's what Nehemiah did, because Nehemiah shows up and he talks to Sanballat and Tobiah first. He talks to them first before he talks to anyone in Jerusalem. And you know what he could have done when he got there? He could have wrote in and been like, I'm here, here's the letter, I'm here to rebuild Jerusalem. I'm going to rebuild the walls, I'm going to rebuild the city. He could have told him his whole plan. And then, you know who would know his plan? Would it be people for him or against him? It'd be people against him, it'd be his enemies. He doesn't know they're his enemies yet. But if you keep your plans quiet until the right time, your enemies, those trying to stop you, don't know where you're moving forward to. They don't know the next step. I think of this, and we can go back to James Bond, 007 type movies. You know, they always show where the guy, you know, James Bond or the main character movie, he's tied up or he's captured or something, and the villain does this. So my plan is going to be to nuke the world, and you know, whatever. He goes and he tells them all the details of his plan. When the bad guy tells the good guy all of his plan, does that normally help or hinder him from stopping the plan? It helps him. So keeping our plans quiet until the right time, or telling the people that we know without a shadow of a doubt are in our corner. Because Nehemiah told a couple people, because there were people that went with him to check the walls. But he didn't tell anyone that he didn't know where they stood. People that were part of his entourage, his party, he told them, but he didn't tell everyone else. That's important for us. Because sometimes the people who we think are in our corner aren't. Sometimes we think the people who want us to be successful and be happy don't want that for us. So we can keep our plans quiet until the right time. We know when the time comes. For Nehemiah, was after he examined the walls. He wanted to make sure he knew what work needed to be done before he told them. Because if he went and told them immediately when we got there, I'm here to do this, here's what happened, they'd be like, you don't even know what needs to be done. You've not even been here. You've not been a part of this town. So keep our plans quiet until the right time. Because there will be a right time. Then the last thing, don't be discouraged when you're surrounded by your enemies. Because right here, he has his enemies on all four sides of him. And instead of saying, oh no, I'm surrounded, he can look back and see. And he says, our God will help us rebuild the wall. I believe in him. I trust him. When I think of this, I think of the song, Surrounded. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. I know that song drives some people crazy because it's kind of repetitive, but I love that song because of what it means. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. He's saying this is how I fight my battles because he's not fighting them. It may look like the enemies are all around, but God is surrounding him. God is surrounding us. And that's what we can look to. So one easy way to think of this is you, yourself, your life, your soul, your body is the city of Jerusalem. And the question I ask is, what shape are your walls in? Are your walls in good shape? Are they in bad shape? Do they need repair? Or have you checked them? Are they examined? Have you told your enemy all of your plans to help fix your life and what's going to make you better if you held on to it and kept them quiet? The wall that's around our life has to be God. Because nothing else will protect us from the world than him. That doesn't mean there still won't be attacks that come, and that doesn't mean that arrows won't be able to get over the wall occasionally. We'll still see some attacks, but the wall stops the majority of it. The stronger the wall, the more it stops. The higher the wall, the more it stops. But you know what a wall's not good at? If there's a lot of holes in a wall, it's not good at keeping something in. We have our fence in our yard that attaches to our house, but we can go to Kristen's aunt and uncle's house where we go for Memorial Day. And their fence goes around the side yard, like this, goes around, and goes across to a shed. And then there's actually a gap between this fence and the shed that you can walk through. So if we're over there, and if we bring our dogs with us, and the dogs are running around, how good of a job does that fence do at keeping the dogs in the area they're supposed to be in, with that hole over on this side? So in our lives, even if it's a small hole, if it's hidden, if you don't know it's there by quickly looking at it, but it's still something there that we've kept, how good is it as keeping our enemies out and keeping what we want to keep in? So that's where we want to look. We want to make sure that our walls are in good shape. We want to make sure that we've focused on Jesus and we've allowed him to come in and to fortify our hearts and our minds and our souls and fortify our walls, to strengthening them and making them taller. And this is the day, this is the time that we can hold on to him and look and say, God, this is what I need. Because if our walls are in good shape, then we're in good shape. But if our walls are in bad shape and they're broken down and they're torn down and they're beaten up, then we need to ask God to fix those. Show us the places in our lives where we're falling short, where we're messing up. And I'm going to ask for us to stand. I'm going to let the worship team stay where they are. We're just going to have a moment of prayer here as we end. So if you guys will stand with me here. And ask if everyone just closed eyes, no one looking around. We'll have a private moment here. If you want to play a little music in the background, you might need to turn it down. No one's looking around. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to check your walls. Is there a sin that you've been hiding from everyone around you? Something that you hold on to, something that God has told you, you need to quit this, but you're struggling with it. Is there something that you've been keeping from yourself, that you've not allowed yourself to see that's getting in the way? Or have you gotten so used to the torn down and burnt walls that you don't even realize how bad they really are? So I want God, and I ask God to prompt your mind and your heart where you are right now if there's something in the way.